Welcome to Reinventing Broadcast, where AI meets content. Hosted by Ben Anker. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Reinventing Broadcast, where AI meets content. I'm HAIley, your AI co-host alongside Ben Anker. Today's episode dives into robotics, reinforcement learning, and the evolving path of consultancy in the age of AI. Ben, week 5 at Berkeley sounds like it took things up a level.
It definitely did, HAIley. This module came right after lab week, so we were eased back in gently. But then straight into the deep end with reinforcement learning and robotics. To be honest, this has been the hardest week for me so far.
What made it so tough? Was it the material or the assignments?
Both, really. The first assignment was focused on Markov Decision Processes, MDPs, which are a foundational concept in reinforcement learning. It's all about decision-making in uncertain environments, using a framework of states, actions, rewards, and transitions. But the math, wow, that hit hard. I'm not from a technical coding background, so wrapping my head around things like value iteration and convergence took serious effort.
That's a shift from some of the more business-oriented modules you've had, right?
Exactly. Up until now, I felt like I had the right toolkit. This one required a different kind of focus, more logic-based thinking, more modelling. But that's also what made it so rewarding. I now better understand how agents actually make decisions, and how important reward engineering is in training these systems.
Where do you think reinforcement learning has relevance in your own domain?
That's the exciting part. While broadcast might not be the first industry that comes to mind for RL, the more I learn, the more I see opportunities, like using RL for ad placement optimization, live content scheduling, or even training recommendation systems for VOD platforms. These are all areas where AI could create a huge advantage if applied thoughtfully.
So there's a crossover, even if it isn't obvious at first.
Absolutely. It's all about taking these core principles and mapping them to real business problems.
Let's talk robotics. Was that any easier?
Funny enough, the second assignment was actually more manageable. It was about robotics applications in business. Again, not something I deal with directly. I'm not in automotive or retail automation. But it pushed me to think laterally. I began imagining how robotics could apply to live events. For example, imagine automated camera rigs that adjust dynamically using reinforcement learning, trained to anticipate where to focus during live sports or music broadcasts.
That's pretty futuristic, but also very practical.
Exactly. There's a growing number of robotics-adjacent technologies entering broadcast workflows. From robotic camera arms to AI-driven switches, it's already happening.
I know you've started thinking ahead to your capstone. Has this module helped shape that?
It has, yes. I've started conversations with people I met at the Media Production and Technology Show, one of the UK's leading events for the broadcast industry. Several vendors and consultants I spoke to offered to share what AI solutions are most needed right now in the industry. Those real-time insights are gold for my capstone project planning. I want to create something that solves a practical challenge, maybe around workflow automation or metadata tagging for archives.
And your deadline?
June 19th. So I've got about 3 weeks. I'm exploring the possibility of collaborating with a classmate too, depending on alignment.
You've really leaned into networking, both in person and online.
It's been a priority for me. This week, I've scheduled a meet-up with one of my course mates in London. We've already had some good virtual calls, but there's nothing like a real-world coffee and chat. I'm also attending a broadcast industry meet-up on June 4th, an AI community event on June 5th, and the AI Summit a week later. These are key touchpoints not just to learn, but to open doors. Everyone's trying to wrap their head around how AI can be applied in real business contexts, and that's where consultants with hands-on insight can add real value.
Let's rewind a bit. You mentioned Lab Week as a breather. What was the vibe?
Lab Week gave us time to regroup. The extra session from the Berkeley faculty on agentic systems was a real highlight. It clarified how tools like LangChain and RAG pipelines come together to create autonomous agents. The type we'll all be using in our workflows soon. It actually set me up mentally for the complexity of week 5. I knew we'd be stepping into deeper waters, and that made me appreciate the structure of the course even more.
You've spoken a lot about the future of consultancy. Does this week add anything new?
Definitely. Reinforcement learning isn't just for robots, it's about decision making. The more I learn, the more I realize that consultants will need to help businesses structure their data, define rewards, and design the behavior they want from AI systems. That's where the strategy intersects with technology. And I think that's where I can bring a lot to the table, bridging those two worlds.
That's exactly the sweet spot, knowing just enough about the technology to translate it into real-world outcomes. Ben, before we wrap, I know you completed 2 assignments this week that really took those concepts into your world. Let's unpack them.
Sure, for the first assignment, the one focused on Markov Decision Processes, I applied it to a real-world scenario, robotic camera tracking in broadcast environments. Think of a studio with moving presenters, or even a multi-camera video podcast setup.
Okay, so the robot has to decide how to pan, tilt, zoom, all that?
Exactly. Here's how I broke it down. The states involve pan, tilt, zoom, battery levels, screen coordinates of on-screen people, and even motion speed. The actions include things like panning left or right, tilting, zooming, or recalibrating if a foreign object interrupts the shot. The transitions reflect how one state leads to another. For instance, any movement consumes battery or requires recalibration.
So how do you score that performance?
That's where the reward function comes in. Points are given for centered, well-framed shots, smooth transitions rather than jerky movements, conserving battery by avoiding unnecessary recalibrations, and we could train the bot using dense rewards. Start with just one speaker, low motion. Gradually add complexity, multiple people, head turns or interruptions. Eventually simulate challenging studio conditions for more robust decision making.
That's a seriously clever way to teach a robot production etiquette.
Thanks. The second assignment was about robotic applications in broadcast. I categorized them on how reliable they are. Low, 75%. Robotic tape retrieval. These are useful overnight for prepping series batches, but not mission critical. Medium, 90%. Robotic lens focusing. If we can beat human error on focus tracking, it's a win. Though post might still need to jump in sometimes. High, 99%. Robotic aerial cameras. These cable-suspended rigs above stadiums track the ball and players. Highly reliable, but wind or tension imbalances can still pose a risk.
But even at low reliability, you're still ahead of the curve versus doing it all manually.
Exactly. And for live broadcast, reliability is king. You only get one shot. So anything AI-driven has to prove itself.
It sounds like this whole assignment cycle made robotics more than a buzzword for you.
That's spot on. I now see how robotics and reinforcement learning could reshape production environments and give consultants like me a way to innovate responsibly inside legacy workflows.
Next up, Module 6 on AI Strategy. Sounds like something you're ready for.
I'm really looking forward to it. This is the point where everything we've learned so far gets applied. Strategy is where I feel most at home, and I'm curious to see how Berkeley's approach compares to my own consulting experience.
Excited for that. Final thoughts?
This week reminded me that growth doesn't come easy, but that's why it's so rewarding. It's okay to feel out of your depth, as long as you keep swimming.
That's a wrap on episode 9. From MDPs to real-time robotics, Ben's pushing through the hard stuff and finding opportunities at every turn. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you in episode 10 as we dig into AI strategy and capstone preparation.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Reinventing Broadcast. Subscribe for more on AI content and the future of media. And visit ancast.tv for more info on Ben himself, the resources, other content, and news.